So my name is Anne Schwieger. I am working to get an initiative off the ground called the Digital Equity Project.
My name is Sheila Dugan. Last year I was a 2013 Code for America Fellow, but before that I worked on the state broadband initiatives, first in Virginia and then in South Carolina. Right now I'm working for a nonprofit that focuses on closing the digital divide.
Infrastructure, kind of a scary topic for a lot of people. I'm Deborah Acosta. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer for the city of San Leandro, where Lit San Leandro is being built through a public-private partnership that's providing our commercial businesses a 10 gigabit network that is exploding our city in a very positive way. But today we're going to talk about how we're starting to work on the digital divide issues.
Okay, great. So we have 3 goals for our time together. We'd like to present you with some information. We'd like to learn from you. And we'd like to start digging into some next steps. Hand it over to Sheila, who will offer an overview of our time together.
First of all, we're really going to start by understanding the scope of the problem. I think some people, especially when we're in a group that's so connected, and I literally sleep with my computer every night, we don't understand that there are people, who can't afford to get online. So we're going to talk about how big this issue is, and some assumptions that people have about the digital divide. We're then going to talk about what cities are doing to solve this problem. We're going to focus on sort of smaller projects, and then we're going to focus on larger projects like what's happening in San Leandro. The goal is to sort of present a variety of options. So it's a huge issue, but we don't want you to feel overwhelmed, like there's nothing you can do if you don't have millions of dollars in your city budget. And then finally, we really want to open up the floor and learn from you and give you the opportunity to ask us some questions, especially Deb. What they're doing right now in San Leandro is very innovative. It's not happening all across the country, so we really want you guys to get some time to connect with us and her. So I work on this issue. It's my job. And one thing that people are surprised that there are about 1 in 4 households that lack home access to the internet. This was recently numbers released by the U.S. Census Bureau earlier this year in February. Recently, the American Community Survey released more numbers, and around 30 million Americans are offline. Some of the reasons why people say they're not online is that, digital literacy is one of those. Technology can be a little intimidating. If you don't know how to use a computer, if you don't know what Google Chrome is, if you don't know how to navigate online, it can sometimes become a barrier to actually getting service. Relevancy. Some people don't understand why they need the internet. They don't understand how it could positively impact their quality of life. Also, you have some people, they've lived 20, 30 years without the internet. Why do they need it now? But what we're finding that's the most important reason is cost. Service is expensive. If you're living on a fixed budget and it's either groceries, medication, or internet access, guess what? You're going to choose to feed yourself and your family. And I know most of us pay for connections, and every time that money gets debited from our account or we write our check, we cringe. I know I do. It's important to focus on this issue because some of our most vulnerable populations are unconnected, low-income communities, as well as some minority communities and senior citizens. When we're thinking about, I think it's important for this audience to understand, is that when we're developing applications to help people better connect with their government or rolling out initiatives at school that are designed for people to leverage technology in the classroom, home access becomes really important. And what we need to do is not marginalize populations that have historically been marginalized. Also, we don't want to deepen achievement gaps. When you have students that, they have this wonderful one-to-one initiative in school, they're playing around with the iPad, they're accessing content, they're downloading lesson plans, and they're doing all these wonderful things in the classroom. When they get home, they need to be able to do that too, because guess what? Johnny's whose mother who makes 2, 3, 4 times as much as some of the lowest income students, they're accessing that quality content at home. So we want to make sure that people have the same quality learning environment. And I think it's important to point out this quote. This is Darielle Bradley. She actually benefited from one of EveryoneOn's programs.
And what the digital divide looks like in most communities is people sitting outside of the McDonald's parking lot trying to finish a paper, people in a long line in a library trying to get on a computer for 30 minutes to submit an assignment or to, work on their resume. So that's what the digital divide sort of looks like in our communities across the country.
Thank you, Sheila. I'm going to quickly go over some assumptions about the role of mobile technology and public libraries in our broadband ecosystems. So looking first at the opportunities that mobile technology offer. For many people, mobile technology is an on-ramp to digital citizenship. For the demographic groups that Sheila just spoke about, this is we're seeing the data is showing us increasingly important. Mobile technology does come with limitations. From a user perspective, there are just some things that you don't use your mobile phone to do. Would you use your mobile phone to file taxes? Would you use it to apply to college? I assume the answer is no on both counts. Data usage caps can really limit a rich online exploration for people who can't afford to just go over that cap every month. What we're finding is that though mobile is really critical and increasingly so, what we have is what's called a second order digital divide. So it's no longer about do you have access to the internet or not, it's how are you actually able to use this tool in your day-to-day life to move forward. When we look at some data, about the types of activities we do online and the categories of just the relationship between government and citizens, upward mobility, and consumption of news media, we see that there's quite a difference between less connected users and users who have home broadband. And I will note that in this case, less connected includes mobile-only users. Zeroing in now on these two activities that are about the relationship between government and citizens, a 19% and a 22% difference is not acceptable. So all of us here at CFA, I think, have some really exciting work ahead of us. Moving on to public libraries. Public libraries have amazing opportunities. They're free. You can go there and you can get training and assistance. And similar to mobile technology, public libraries are an important, very important point of internet access for the groups who Sheila highlighted. They do come with limitations. Libraries are not 24/7 enterprises. Home broadband is. There are some incredibly important capacity issues we need to wrap our heads around as they relate to, public libraries in the US. The American Library Association in 2011 did a survey, and they found that 76% of libraries don't even have, enough computers to meet the demand of their patrons. 56% don't have enough staff to assist patrons with important activities like job searches. It's a big problem. We're going to look now at some models. The first one we're going to look at is New York. We're going to look at Chicago. We're going to look at Wilson, North Carolina, and also San Leandro, California. So there's some good news out there. I will say that very few cities are doing everything right now, with the exception of maybe San Leandro. But we're excited to highlight some good news out there. So many of you have probably heard of the digital roadmap that New York City has to guide its path forward. There are some really great things going on. So the Broadband Technology Opportunities Program funded digital literacy and home broadband adoption initiatives are very wisely embedded in many cases within the Department of Education. There's a mobile tech fan. If you don't have the internet where you live, it will come to you. There's a lot of buzz right now about Wi-Fi and phone booths. It's not off the ground yet. It seems like New York City, under the new mayor, has reinvigorated interest in this. They're looking now, I believe, for Google or someone to get this off the ground. A lot of really exciting work with public libraries. The Knight Foundation recently awarded the New York Public Library, as well as Chicago Public Library, with a grant for a one-year pilot that will do a Wi-Fi device lending program. In the case of New York City, you can check out these devices for a year. So think of what this means for people who previously were, mobile-only users or, waiting in line for 3 hours for a 30-minute slot at the library. Now they can use this anytime they want at home. Moving on to Chicago, I will say that I believe that Chicago is getting more exciting by the minute when we talk about broadband. Their Chicago Tech Plan, front and center, states that they believe that access and adoption is critical to the city's future. Very exciting. Few cities have gone there yet. Their access and adoption related initiatives within this plan take a place-based orientation, modeled after the Smart Communities program, again, which was BTOP funded in part, also received some foundation funding and some money from the city. And place-based orientation is increasingly the bread and butter of good city planning and urban policy. They also front and center state that they want to increase low-cost broadband options. As Sheila noted in one of her slides, cost is the main barrier. Going back for a minute to the Smart Communities program, even after people were, you get over the literacy barrier, you get over the relevance barrier, for 1 out of 3 participants, cost was still what kept them from having broadband in the home. Take it away, Sheila.
So you really can't talk about cities and digital equity without thinking about municipal broadband networks. What we're doing is we're operating in a market that often isn't competitive enough with prices that are too high. Wilson, North Carolina is an interesting example because what they did is they built out their own fiber optic network. They borrowed around $33 million initially to build out the infrastructure, and I think in a total they borrowed around 35. This project stands as a success in the sense that this community has high-speed connections as well as, Time Warner Cable, which is one of the incumbents. It sort of controlled price increases on their behalf, as well as Wilson Greenlight often offers prices lower than its competitors. I think you can see all the benefits of a model like this, but I think it's important to understand that projects like this aren't easy to implement in a lot of communities. Like any large infrastructure project costing millions of dollars, it can be a political lightning rod, especially if there are cost overruns or delays. But I think it's important to really think that what are we doing? Is it enough to sort of solve this divide? I included the price of the services for Greenlight, and those are competitive rates, especially for the quality of service that you would get, but you have to really think about those families that are low income. Is that enough for someone who, is scrambling together pennies to make sure their kids are fed? So I think community broadband networks are fantastic, but without really focusing on the digital equity piece, we may have not gotten further than we want to. And now I'm just going to give Deb some time to talk about all the wonderful things that they're doing in San Leandro.
Wilson is typical. It's the kind of way that municipal broadbands are typically built. You have an existing infrastructure because you have a public utility company. And hey Carla, how are you? Because you have a public utility company, you actually have the conduit in the ground already. And that actually enables you to pull the fiber through. So that makes it a little bit easier. San Leandro is different. We actually had a very unique opportunity that actually began, first of all, I have to say, with our city council, who has set some very clear goals for our city. First of all, fiscal sustainability. All of you who live in California are aware that our redevelopment agency went away several years ago. Tax increment financing, meaning all that cash that used to come into the city to be able to do, to address blight and other kind of urban redevelopment projects, gone. So fiscal sustainability really became a goal for our city council. Also, creating economic sustainability, including creating in San Leandro a center of innovation. So what does that mean? Well, it was really clear that if you're talking about the Bay Area, we're talking about technology. So what does that mean? That's enabled us, that's part of my goal, is to figure out what is being a center of innovation. And finally, connecting really deep connections with our schools. And that becomes very important when you talk about overcoming the digital divide, especially in a city like San Leandro, where 70% of our kids are in free or reduced lunch programs. So what happened is, in San Leandro City Council approved a license agreement allowing installation of a fiber optic loop. Dr. Patrick Kennedy, the CEO and founder of OSIsoft, our biggest tech company, ran into a big problem. His Pi software pulls data out of utility companies around the world, Saudi Arabian Pipeline, PG&E here at home, millions and billions of bits of data points every day, every second. You can't do that on copper. You can't do it. I mean, you can pay for a lot of T1 lines and it could be really expensive and you can make something happen, but it won't work effectively in the long run. So he came to the city and said, look, you have infrastructure, you have conduit. We know that you built out here, this blue line, you have conduit for your transportation network all over the city. Let me pull fiber optic cabling through there, a 288 strand. City, you can have 30 strands of it. Do whatever you want with it, no restrictions on it. I'll take the rest and I'll connect up the businesses in this city because we're a highly industrial area, and you can see right here, highly industrial, manufacturing for the most part, which of course most of it went away during the 1980s. The incumbents won't connect there. So you have companies that don't even have DSL. Some of the rest of them you maybe have less than 3 megabits per second down, don't even talk about up. And you're sharing it with 20, 30, 40, 50 employees. So it's disastrous. How do we become part of the global community with that? So the blue line is already connected. Then we applied for a kind of revolutionary, the EDA, the US Federal Economic Development Agency, said, fiber optics is infrastructure? Seriously? Okay, convince us. So they convinced them, and we were able to get a $2.1 million federal grant. Construction's going to start this month on completion down to our waterfront, down to a major industrial area right here, and here where a major 500,000 square foot Class A tech campus is going to be built, and out in our Adams tract where companies like Kaiser Permanente Garfield Innovation Center, yes, the one that innovates all the hospitals throughout the United States for Kaiser, right next to the Oakland International Airport. So that's the infrastructure. Lots I can tell you about how that is completely turned around how we do business, attracting in 3D printing manufacturing companies, creating an entire center of innovation at a former Dodge Chrysler auto plant, 350,000 square feet that was virtually empty a year ago. Today, not only is it almost filled, but the price per square foot, which is still ridiculously low for San Francisco, but has zoomed from 85 cents a square foot to $1.25 square foot. Yes, fiber optics adds value to real estate. So now we've zoomed to, well, how do we become more inclusive? So we're actually going to announce tonight at an event, San Leandro by Design, out of the box, because we're doing it on a rooftop. We have a big event that the San Leandro Unified School District, we're going to work with them to grant 2 of our fibers, 2 of the 30 fibers to them, so that every single school in San Leandro Unified School District can be connected to a 10 gigabit link. Each school will get 10 gigabits. So we're talking about kids, 70% of them are on reduced or free lunch programs. So this is the digital divide that we're talking about. We talk about, they did an excellent job of persuading you that there is a digital divide in the household, but there's no demand coming back to us. We're not hearing in City Hall, I don't have broadband, I don't have access to good internet. But if these kids are experiencing it in the schools, and they need it for project-based learning, so I'm not sure how many of you are aware that today the mandate across all 50 states is, hey, education has to be relevant. It has to be relevant to a job that you might be going for after you graduate. So based upon this, we've got to teach our kids relevance of internet access, technology, teach them the skills that are actually going to connect them into businesses. And manufacturing today is not your mama's grandfather's manufacturing anymore. This is all advanced. If you see some of the existing manufacturing companies still in San Leandro, Applied Fusion, Koffler Electrical, Scandic Springs, this is all state-of-the-art, lasers, fusion, amazing things going on. These are skilled workers that are needed. And what's more is, chances are, if we teach our kids the proper skills in the schools K through 12 and teach them how to pitch, teach them about the project, have them pitch to some of our business owners, so that they can give feedback. They're going to be ready when they graduate from high school to go directly into great jobs. This, my friend, is bridging the digital divide. And when they have households of their own, they're not going to settle. They're not going to settle. They're going to demand. So in terms of the households, we don't have an answer yet. We're actually looking at implementing within the next couple of months a wireless project, citywide free Wi-Fi, wherever the broadband, wherever the fiber optics are, we can put up wireless access points. So we're getting ready to do that. And that will cover a lot of the city, but it won't cover everything. So you can see there's a lot of residential out here. We're researching answers to that. How do we connect? Technology is advancing every day, but we completely understand how big of a challenge this is and how necessary it is. By the way, San Leandro also has been identified as, I think, the 5th or 6th most diverse city in America, right behind Oakland. So that wasn't the case 20 years ago, but it sure is today. So by solving the problem here, we think we're building a model that can actually be duplicated by cities anywhere, as long as they understand the infrastructure that they have and use it effectively through public-private partnerships. We can all get it done. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. So I'm going to speed through the rest of the slides because I can tell by the looks on all of your faces you have lots of questions to ask, especially to Debbie. But I think it's important just to talk about some best practices. Understand your city's needs and valuable assets. Debbie, what's happening in San Leandro? Perfect example. Build community-wide coalitions with a diverse set of stakeholders. This isn't just a problem with the education community or what's going on in City Hall. You need to really bring everyone to the table, from school administrators to medical practitioners, everyone, because they each have a stake in getting unconnected households online. I think it's important to collaborate with other municipalities in your area, whether it goes well or doesn't go well, but we don't live in tidy, packed little communities. We are commuting from place to place. We want to leverage each other's resources and networks. It's kind of interesting. There's a cool little project going on in Roanoke Valley where in Virginia, a lot of money was given from the federal government as well as the tobacco fund to build out networks in some of the rural communities, but Roanoke wasn't quite impoverished enough or connected to the tobacco industry to sort of get that money. So a lot of the municipalities came together and looked at ways that they could provide faster networks to the people. Quite frankly, it doesn't seem to be going well right now, but I think it was a powerful exercise for a lot of stakeholders to get around the table and understand what the community as a whole needed, not the tight little political boundaries that we consider communities. Constantly think of sustainability. What's working now may not even work in 2 years or 5 years. Technology moves fast. Even when you are doing a smaller lending program, how are you going to keep that going beyond just the first initial year without funding from your foundation or the city council? Make sure that this is not a one-time thing. Make sure this is really integrated in your plans. Develop plans that keep in mind the needs of your most vulnerable populations. This is a challenge for me at EveryoneOn in particular, because when you say unconnected households and you're talking about offering people low-cost offers, it's not just enough to have things in English and Spanish. You think about how do people connect and learn about offers? What about people who aren't literate even in their native languages? So you really have to constantly push yourself to think about, some of the most vulnerable people in your community. And I think Anne's going to talk about the importance of neighborhood contacts.
Yes, thank you, Sheila. So, I think it's fair to say that no two neighborhoods are alike. Each neighborhood in our country and everywhere in the world has a unique constellation of institutions, schools, churches, universities, libraries, nonprofit organizations, different demographic mixes, different, rates of adoption, different rates of mobile technology adoption. There are real opportunities to learn from successes in other areas of urban policy that have really taken again, going back to smart communities, a real place-based orientation. What's going on here? What's going well? How can we improve? Who needs to be at the table? What resources need to be at the table? How do we move forward? And that will vary neighborhood by neighborhood. And we get very excited in all of our work about scalability. Scalability is important. We need frameworks and models that allow us, though, to be very responsive to unique neighborhood contexts.
So right now, what we're going to do, there are a couple of questions that we were interested in exploring with you guys about sort of naming the assets and tools cities have. How are we integrating broadband adoption into our economic development plans and other things we're doing as cities? And sort of how do we make our initiatives sustainable? Those are questions that we're interested in hearing from you. Also, we want to give you an opportunity to sort of talk to Debbie about what's going on in San Leandro and talk to us about the work that we're doing in our individual organizations. So we just kind of want to open up the floor. Does anyone have any questions? I think Debbie and Anne will stand up. Yeah. Any thoughts? Yeah.
Hi, I'm Carla from the California Technologies Fund. How do we work better as a coalition on this issue? I mean, you're brilliant. As far as like what's going on, and the California Emerging Technologies Fund was seeded by the PUC in 2005 to close the digital divide. But what we really need to be doing is, having, getting together and having the best models and really going forward. And it's like, it seems to be everybody's doing their own thing, but we're not working together as a unit. And definitely, we need your expertise. And how do you see us coming together more as a force in closing this?
Collaboration's tough. I mean, and especially when you're talking about integrating broadband adoption or economic development plans. You talk to where it really needs to start. It needs to start with the policymakers, and the policymakers are looking to their audience, who are the voters. If the voters are not demanding it of the policymakers, then the policymakers are going to have a difficult time prioritizing or seeing the importance of this, creating the infrastructure, let alone what the things are that we use it for. They're going to have a really hard time prioritizing this. So then you're starting to talk about collaboration. So in San Leandro, we're actually, Dr. Kennedy, who is the owner of Lit San Leandro, which is actually leases the fiber optics, is actually quite eager to share the fiber and to expand it out into other cities around us. It's proven to be quite challenging, because the cities, first of all, don't really understand the importance of it. So when you're prioritizing your budget against public safety and fixing roads, and California's roads are horrendous, and any one of the myriad of other issues and topics that have to be addressed, this is just noise in the background. So to the extent that there are organizations who are tasked with doing this, then doggone it, they need to get us together to talk about it. And so that we can understand that there's a way of going about it, starting with assessing your tools and assets. What do you have in your community that can serve as part of the infrastructure? I mean, Wilson and other cities have their own public utility companies. Well, let's start there, people. I mean, if you already have conduit in the ground, you can start talking about doing that. I know that the Economic Development Agency is putting out an RFP, has put out an RFP, or is putting out an RFP to attract an infrastructure, fiber optic infrastructure projects. I know because I got a call from Rhode Island or somebody last week who wanted copies of all of our application documents just to see what we did, so that they could be successful too, which, by the way, I happily shared with him. Happy to do that. So the federal government's beginning to understand that it's infrastructure. So one of the battles that not battles, but kind of conversations that I've had with CFA over the years, and it's a pretty new organization, and I completely respect the work that they're doing around open data, but just as these ladies have identified, if you can't access the data, it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. So we really need to get a focus on the infrastructure to make sure that people have access to it wireless will begin to have some impact for all of us over the years as it gets better and better and more robust. But ultimately, all of that goes back to fiber. None of it goes back to copper ultimately. So we need to really think about that.
So I have a question. You spoke, I'm from New York City, I'm Noel Hidalgo. You spoke of technology changes every 2 years. And so laying fiber, as we've seen in New York City, is long in the tooth. We don't know if it'll actually get done, but at least it's an attempt. How do we bridge the divide right now? I haven't been able to find any real good studies of how low-income individuals connect to the internet. It seems like that happens to be a missing piece. If you have any examples, that'd be great. Also, people who are living in public assistance or in public housing, how are they connecting to the network or the network of networks? Are they using mobile phones? Are they not using mobile phones? Where do we go to find that information?
I have some of that at the California Emerging Technologies Fund. I'll see you after.
Yeah, they actually put out pretty good work.
Yeah, the California Emerging Technologies Fund.
Yes. And also, EveryoneOn, we actually work, I didn't want to speak about our work in particular. We work with a lot of internet service providers to create low-cost offers. For example, we work with Mobile Beacon and Mobile Citizen, and they are a wireless company that operates off of the EBS educational broadband spectrum, and we're able to offer $10 a month unlimited wireless data for low-income households. So there are programs, like when you're talking about getting a household online now, there are programs, low-cost internet programs available, especially through EveryoneOn, with a lot more inclusive eligibility standards that people have access to. So the offer I spoke about earlier today, 36 million Americans are eligible and in coverage for that. Also, this whole lending program model is becoming a lot more popular. A lot of educational institutions, for example, we are doing a small pilot with the Los Angeles Unified School District around the school actually providing wireless routers to students so they can have home access. We worked with Miami-Dade School District with a small pilot of around 500 students to 1,000, and now we scaled up to over 1,500 to provide access at home. So I think when Anne was talking about those projects with the mobile vans and the lending library projects, those are like the creative solutions that we've developed to give people access now while we're thinking of the bigger infrastructure issues that will really change the market.
And actually, I just learned something from that, because with this, we have 2 school districts in San Leandro. San Lorenzo Unified School District and San Leandro. San Leandro is going to get connected to the fiber optics. San Lorenzo isn't totally sure that they need it more than a gigabit. They're going to find out really fast if they do. But their sore spot is connectivity to the homes. I'm paying attention to this because this is really a sweet idea, and we're going to be following up on that.
I think Rebecca.
So, you guys mentioned, all three of you, I think, mentioned that the kind of lack of digital equity in terms of home internet access has not led to demand heard by like policymakers, and I'm wondering if there are any good ways to find, if there are any good proxies for that we can tell policymakers about, or if this is just like a community organizing effort that's going to take a long time.
I'd like to offer some thoughts on that, and thank you for that question. The slide Sheila presented about the anecdote of the junior in high school who had previously been doing homework in a parking lot, that's not unique. There's, I've heard similar anecdotes in, from people in San Antonio. A year or so ago, there was it was a Wall Street Journal article about, kids in internet served areas doing their homework at McDonald's. I think that we need to rethink demand. The demand is there. The demand to pay $60, $70, $80 a month is not. So,
and quite frankly, in my organization, we're seeing a lot of pressure. We're getting a lot of school district leaders, especially, coming to us and saying, how can we solve this home broadband issue? Because we're rolling out a one-to-one initiative and we want our students to take the devices home, or I want to leverage this really cool website and content, but I know a quarter of my students aren't going to be able to do that. You're seeing a shift, like GED is going online. In South Carolina, we had a new law that was passed that allowed, you had to do, if you were applying for unemployment, you had to do at least one of your job searches online to continue receiving unemployment. So you can imagine how huge of a barrier that was for people who don't have home connections. So I think as we're shifting to a more digital world, we're starting to see a little bit more pressure from unconnected households and people, quite frankly, who care about getting unconnected households online.
A lot of this surrounds or is centered upon needs assessment. You can't drive policymakers without a proper needs assessment. And I didn't realize until I got here that the Knight Foundation was one of the sponsors. They've developed an information needs toolkit that I don't know if everybody's aware of. That, and we're actually looking for a way to fund that at an arm's length, so we're not influencing its outcomes. But I think that's a wonderful tool that should be looked at, because it's a really comprehensive way of looking at the real information needs of every community, the skills needed, the supply, it's all there. So I'm going to throw that out.
Thank you.
I'll look into that.
Sorry, I'm from Knight Foundation, and I'm part of the initiative that has developed a toolkit, and it's called the Information Needs Toolkit. It's online at knightfoundation.org.
Has that been
It hasn't been widely adopted, I would say.
right? But is it a little easier to use online now?
No. It's been simplified. It's been simplified.
Can I suggest that that's a great Code for America project?
Thanks.
I'm on city council in Benton, Texas, and you mentioned the support your council had for your initiative, but I imagine it wasn't always that way, and it's not that way in my city.
Right.
Talk to me about the pathway towards building that support on the council. What
Well,
sort
you
of
know, when
rhetoric-
your biggest tech company comes to you and says, you know, if we don't get this, we're kind of out of here. This is a company that was founded in San Leandro and grew in San Leandro 38 years ago. And the founder lives in San Leandro in the same house that he and his wife raised their children in. And he still lives there. He and Pat, the two Pats, still live there. And he comes to you and says, it's that bad. Yes, it's that bad. You kind of got to do something. In addition, we also had, we actually had somewhat of a change in leadership as well at the council levels. And I wasn't around when that happened. So I think it was kind of the perfect convergence of things. It's a new mayor coming in, city council that has been looking at the problem and realizing, I mean, I look back at their 1998 general plan, which had economic development goals that they wanted to become a tech city. Well, it was 1998, but there was no there to do something about it. That's why I'm saying infrastructure is everything. It isn't, okay, but let me rephrase that. It's a game changer, but what you do with it changes the game. And that's from the Kansas City playbook, Google playbook. I love that line because it's true, it's just infrastructure. But if you don't do things with it, nothing will happen. And that's the hard part for elected officials, is to go from, well, it's not a road and I got potholes, to, well, what can we do with it? So as a chief innovation officer, my job was created because of the Lit San Leandro fiber optic loop. And they told me, well, your job is to bring businesses into San Leandro and to get them connected up to the fiber optic loop. That's not what it takes. What it takes is creating a tech and innovation ecosystem where everything's interconnected and where people are actually, it includes workforce and educating our children so that they know how to enter into this ecosystem. So it's a collective part of everything. But without the infrastructure, we couldn't have done where we are today. Just couldn't have. And that's the story you have to tell. And you have to actually bring in expert witnesses to tell them this story, that it can actually be transformational.
Question in the back.
Happy to share.
I've been city manager in a couple cities. One one was Burbank, where we did very similar to what San Leandro did with lit fiber, and we did the school partnership with sort of the development. The one problem we had was with AT&T, the other providers. And so basically they said, if you keep it under the radar, if you stick with commercial, we're fine. As soon as you go to residential, we're going to sue you, because same as you were getting grant money, so you're federally subsidized, you're going to compete with the big boys, and we're just not going to play with that.
So we're just building conduit. We're just building infrastructure. We're not putting in the fiber. We have a private partner. We have a private partner who's pulling the fiber in and who's running the business. Anyone's allowed to run a business. It's not the city running the business.
The city I'm in now is the exact opposite end of the spectrum. It's very low income, very high dropout rate, 95% Hispanic, very low connectivity. I'm having the same problem that this gentleman's having. To get the council on board, because there's just no demand. There's no meetings asking, the businesses aren't asking, we're manufacturing town.
Because they don't know.
And I'm working with the libraries actually, and the one concept I would, because you had it on your slide on the libraries. I don't know that the libraries see themselves as the bridge between this digital divide. They do see themselves as information brokers, but I don't know, there's work to be done to convince libraries on a statewide level and on a national level that you are so important. Libraries have always been a source of
It was the first building we connected. Was our main library. And now we have Arduino workshops there, 3D printing. We have all sorts of things that were not possible before. And again, bridging. It's a bridge. That was our very first building. It's critical. And actually we have what we call a smart city plan that wants to connect up all of the public buildings, right, and the public spaces. And sensor technology, environmental sensor technology. We're actually entering into partnership with a company called Acclima, which specializes in environmental sensors on the ground. And they have a major tech sponsor that they've experimented with these environmental sensors in their 18 campuses around the world. And now they're ready to go public, but they wanted a place where they could build policy, engage citizens, because it's all going to be open data. And you can imagine in a city that is highly industrial, with a ring of residential around it, surrounded by freeways, and an Oakland International Airport on one side, there's going to be social justice issues that come up. There's going to be business, industrial, toxicity, potentially, freeways. It's not enough to disclose the problems. We have to come up with solutions, and there's the collaboration that's important. So EPA, Bay Area Air Quality Management District. But here's the thing. Data is power, right? We can't fix what we don't know anything about. And we have an incredibly supportive city manager, Chris Zapata, who says, the whole digital divide issue, and we've been talking about it a lot lately, if we don't have information about how our environment impacts people, we can't ever fix it. And we need to collaboratively fix it. So here I'm going to go back to it. If we didn't have the fiber optic network, we couldn't be embarking upon these incredible projects. Because again, if you have environmental sensors that are traveling in cars around the city or stationary, or in our schools, where with project-based learning, our kids can be the sleuths figuring this out and coming to the city council with proposals for fixing some of these things and teaching themselves how they're adding to the problem, like getting in their cars and driving someplace instead of using their skateboard or using BART or public transportation. But the point is, it empowers people, and those billions of data points that those environmental sensors are going to pull up every day, this project would not be coming to San Leandro. This tech company would not be investing the millions of dollars that it's proposing to do in San Leandro if we weren't building this fiber optic.
So we received the 5-minute warning a moment ago. So what I think would work really well, and tell me what you think of this, we did some, just raise your hand, rapid fire question. The unconference format of this conference, I think, is really well suited to robust follow-up discussion. If we can collect your questions and then, find a time later today, tomorrow, that would be great. Go. Yeah.
So what you're talking about are huge infrastructure projects, huge volunteer projects, and I'm just like a volunteer for a brigade. So what can these volunteers on the ground who aren't part of government or who aren't policymakers do in order to help
Awesome. What can volunteers do next?
So I'm glad you mentioned it's what you do with it, which I knew we have a gig and trying to figure that out as well. How do you build that ecosystem and the education that allows you to leverage the investment you make? And when you're doing that, how do you ensure it targets those people that aren't normally targeted? Because I think those are harder people to do the education and the outreach for, and that doesn't happen a lot.
I would say one word, placemaking. Just hold that into your head, and placemaking is how you do it.
Thank you. Yeah.
When you were talking about Chicago, you talked about the importance of place-based orientation.
Yep.
If you could just expand on that. I didn't understand what you meant by that, but I understand.
That sounds great. Yes.
Most effective ways to garner public support.
Got it. Thank you.
Civic engagement.
Same. Okay. Yes.
How to mobilize the non-tech community to say to their policymakers, we want it, but more importantly, we will help pay for it.
There's the ticket. Who else? Yes.
Just a resource to highlight, New American Foundation's Open Technology Institute has a broadband planning and low-income community document that has a lot of really practical steps about information and how to categorize your assets and programming.
Thank you. Yes.
How do you overcome historical districts where there's like kind of even though the dark fiber underneath like all of Alexandria, you can't access it. So what kind of ideas do you have on how to get past that?
Thank
It's
you.
owned by private companies?
It's owned by no one knows.
Okay, got it.
Okay, even better.
Yeah.
Even better.
No one knows
Yeah.
where it is.
Yes.
I'm a librarian.
Okay.
Actually, and it's not that we don't care and we're not working on the digital divide. It's that I think a lot of librarians don't know people like us exist.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd like to talk more about making connections.
One quick shout out, because we may not get to follow up with each of you. The Schools, Healthcare, and Libraries Broadband Coalition. Look it up. They're a DC-based organization. They're fantastic. Thank you. Next.
What was that one more time?
The Schools, Healthcare, and Libraries Broadband Coalition. Anyone else? Okay. Thank you so much for joining us today. It was a wonderful opportunity to share information, learn from
thank
you.
you.
And